The true revolution begins the instant you decide to stop peering at wealth from the curb and instead step inside, remove your coat, and sit where only possessors sit. Imagine a polished mahogany desk whose corners have been softened by decades of prosperous elbows. See sunlight gleaming off a brass nameplate that bears your initials, and only your initials, because status that is truly yours needs no credentials beyond your living presence. In that chair, you no longer study balance sheets as puzzles to solve. You read them the way a cartographer reads maps he himself has drawn, quietly assured the terrain will match his markings. That inner relocation from hopeful visitor to rightful owner is the first irreducible key to commanding millions by assumption, and it can be learned like any other art. Begin by recalling a sensory detail that already belongs to genuine abundance. Perhaps it is the way crisp currency crackles when fanned, or the weighty clink a metal pen makes when tapped on a ledger before signing the day's profits. One single concrete note is worth libraries of vague affirmations. Hold that note gently in imagination until it brightens, then step into the scene and allow the rest of the room to build itself around you. The brain is a tireless stagehand. Give it even the smallest prop, a scent, a texture, and it will dress the set, calibrate the lighting, and summon actors who know their lines before you write them. Do not observe the scene from the aisle. See through the eyes of the one seated at the desk. When you lift the pen, you feel the polished barrel against your forefinger. When you glance at the account total, you notice a relaxed curiosity rather than the old rush of adrenaline, because the number is large, yet perfectly ordinary for someone in your position. Now, education demands practice, so translate this sensory ownership into daily rituals. When you walk to the corner shop, straighten your spine as though you are choosing between chauffeurs. When you log into online banking, pause a heartbeat before the page loads and mentally greet a figure that exceeds your historic best by tenfold. Then watch how effortlessly the actual sum begins to inch toward that greeting, obedient to the precedent you set. Speak to servers, clerks, and colleagues in the tone of one who never calculates whether he can afford generosity, but only how best to direct it. Such tonal adjustments teach the subconscious that the new identity is active, not theoretical. Resistance will come disguised as prudence. Quiet murmurs insisting you must observe external evidence before inwardly relocating. Counter them with the principle of present tense authority. Every fact you have ever known began as an unseen conviction in someone's mind. Railroads, skyscrapers, and moon landings were once fragile daydreams. Had their architects waited for proof before feeling rightful mastery, no girders would have risen from the earth. So treat your mounting fortune as an architect treats blueprints. The structure is finished the moment the drawing is approved in imagination, and concrete merely catches up. You may worry that adopting such immediate identity will breed arrogance or reckless spending. On the contrary, genuine ownership carries a fragrance of quiet composure. The newly promoted officer who clanks his sword and boasts has not yet absorbed his commission, while the seasoned admiral gives orders in a whisper that moves fleets. To embody wealth rightly is to exhale steadiness and to spend with the same thoughtful ease that an artist squeezes paint. Lavish where color matters, sparing where blank space speaks louder. Therefore rehearse not only the pleasures of millions, but also the dignified stewardship of them. See yourself signing scholarship grants, underwriting community gardens, funding clean water initiatives in villages whose names you can barely pronounce. That emotional rehearsal inoculates you against the counterfeit identity that flaunts money for spectacle rather than circulating it for life. There is practical technique in naming. Language is the steering wheel of consciousness. Replace the phrase, "I will have," with, "I now have," and listen for the subtle lift it gives your posture. Continue down the ledger. My investments yield. My ventures thrive. My generosity multiplies. Spoken silently but felt deeply, such phrases etch grooves in the mind through which future events will inevitably flow, the way rainwater follows the course carved by patient rivers. At night, when the house is still, use the doorway of drowsiness to engrave the identity more deeply. Lie motionless and imagine that a trusted mentor calls to congratulate you on crossing the threshold into multi-million status. Hear the timbre of their voice, sense the warmth of their handshake, picture the sparkle of satisfaction in their eyes as they recognize that you have become the living proof of everything they ever taught. Let the scene loop until it feels boringly natural. Boredom is a secret signal that the subconscious has accepted the event as history. Novelty thrills, but normality manifests. Throughout the day, regard contrary evidence with gentle amusement. An unexpected expense, a slow sales week, a delayed payment, each is but the final twitch of an outdated self-concept shaking off its old skin. Do not wrestle with the phantom. Return instead to your desk in imagination. Run a fingertip along the grain of the wood and issue the calm directive that all accounts balance in your favor. Facts will obey, for they are clay, awaiting the warmth of your certainty to take form. If ever you feel the tension of pretending, remember you are not pretending, you are rehearsing. Actors on opening night do not accuse themselves of deception. They commit so fully to the role that audiences forget the actor exists. Rehearse until the curtain falls on the old story and rises on the new, revealing you not as performer, but as author who writes wealth into every scene by the authority of feeling. Finally, measure progress not only in coins, but in identity markers. Do you breathe slower when discussing investments? Does the thought of paying for someone else's education quicken your pulse with joyful anticipation rather than with fear? Can you stroll past a luxury storefront and feel kinship instead of longing? These are the mileposts of internal fortune. When they appear, you may be sure the external fortune is already stamped, sealed, and traveling toward you on the surest of express lines. Your own expanded self-concept. Let us study the silent architect of fortune, the feeling tone that rules the ledger long before ink is poured upon it. A merchant I once knew prided himself on memorizing every statistic of his trade. Seasonal demand curves, shipping tariffs, regional buying power. Yet profits slipped through his fingers year after year while a neighboring competitor, far less tutored in arithmetic, expanded effortlessly. Intrigued, I visited the rival's shop one early morning and found him whistling over a cup of tea, preparing to open the till. His conversation contained no fevered projections, only a serene certainty that today's sales would naturally exceed yesterday's, because that is what they always do. A phrase delivered with the same calm indifference one might reserve for tomorrow's sunrise. There, in that casual melody, was the secret lever. Numbers, it appeared, are not inert symbols. They are living servants that vibrate to the pitch of the heart that summons them. To cultivate such emotional authority, begin by recognizing that every figure on a bank statement is the echo of an earlier feeling. The mind, taught from childhood to worship outward evidence, insists the process runs the other way, that feeling must trail fact. Yet observe your own life objectively for a single week, and you will see the inversion. Days when you rose buoyant, certain, appreciative, small coincidences fell at your feet like coins from a friendly sky. Days when you permitted irritation to smolder. Even modest gains hid themselves in the folds of circumstance. This reveals the immutable sequence. Mood first, money second. Therefore, treat your inner climate as the climate of the harvest field. Just as the orchard cannot plead exemption from frost, your accounts cannot plead exemption from persistent melancholy or fear. Haply the farmer owns tools to modify soil and protect buds. Likewise, you possess faculties to tune the inner barometer. The simplest of these is deliberate breathing. 10 long, slow breaths before reviewing finances will smooth the electrochemical seas, allowing higher feelings to float naturally to the surface. As oxygen deepens, invite into imagination one sensory cue that signals abundant ease, perhaps the scent of polished leather in a new car, or the muffled hush of thick carpet in a hotel suite at midnight. Let this cue swell until it crowds out every lesser vibration. You are not escaping reality. You are programming it, crafting the emotional negative from which tomorrow's photograph must develop. Some protest that such rehearsal is self-deception. The very charge betrays misunderstanding, for emotion need not wait upon eyesight to be authentic. Consider the lover who reads an overseas letter and feels warmth as real as any embrace. Consider the athlete who, while still bedridden, rehearses the victory lap so vividly that muscle fibers twitch. The body and its circumstances are impressionable clay. Feeling is the furnace that hardens or softens them into form. Accept, then, that you are free to occupy any emotional altitude at will, and that numbers will climb obediently toward that height. Practice by converting all conversations about money into subtle reminders of plenty. When a friend laments rising costs, respond inwardly, even if silently. All needs are met with graceful surplus. When news outlets trumpet market volatility, smile within and affirm, "My holdings ascend on perfect law." These invisible replies are not wasted mutterings. They are tuning forks that recalibrate your nervous system. Over time, you will notice that bills arrive with surprising discounts, unforeseen refunds surface, and invitations to profitable ventures find you without strenuous pursuit. Skeptics will call such events luck. You will know them as manifestations of tonal mastery. Education requires exercises, so devise a daily drill. Each morning, before touching the floor, conjure the emotional flavor of effortless solvency. Feel the lightness of a heart unburdened by calculation, the confident generosity that tips lavishly because it delights in circulation. Hold this sensation for 60 seconds, no more, no less, yet hold it with utter sincerity. Then rise and forget the drill entirely, allowing the day to unfold. Record results each night. Within a fortnight, the entries will convince you that 1 minute of pure tone outweighs an hour of anxious planning. Of course, emotional authority does not imply continual euphoria. Negative waves will crest just as storms visit even the balmiest coastlines. The disciplined practitioner greets these waves as reminders to realign, not as verdicts of failure. When disappointment pricks, acknowledge it briefly, then pivot, close the eyes, exhale, and summon the opposite pole. Relief, satisfaction, triumph. Hold it until the newly amplified vibration supplants the old. This is not repression, it is selection. You are curator of the inner museum, choosing which exhibits remain on display. Scripture offers practical symbolism on this point. Let the weak say, "I am strong." Notice it does not advise the weak to beg, reason, or negotiate. It commands them to declare the state they wish to embody. Speech voiced with feeling is the chisel that carves new features onto seemingly stone facts. Train yourself, therefore, to speak as the wealthy speak, not merely in public, but in the privacy of thought. Replace "I hope this deal closes" with "This deal is already sealed in my favor." Replace "I'm trying to save" with "Funds flow to me in ceaseless streams." Voice these phrases lightly, almost playfully, for weightiness implies strain. Lightness signals mastery. If ever you doubt the potency of such adjustment, recall that every innovation, from telegraph to smartphone, began as an intangible thrill in somebody's nerves. The world you navigate is therefore a museum of former feelings crystallized. Why should your millions be different? The forge is ready, the raw material plentiful. Stoke the fire with chosen emotion, and form will answer. Obedience to this principle does not require extraordinary intellect. It demands only the courage to feel ahead of the evidence and the humility to let mood, not logic, carry the scepter. So tonight, before sleep claims the senses, rehearse a single scene. You glance at an account summary and feel nothing but gentle amusement at the digit's length. Let that amusement settle into the marrow. Fall asleep in its glow. You will rise to a world already bending to match the notes you struck, because numbers, like trained musicians, cannot resist the baton of confident emotion. Persistence is the slow, steady drumbeat that summons invisible armies to the field long after daylight enthusiasm has scattered. Picture a sculptor in a dim studio. Every morning he chips once at an unyielding block. Every evening he sweeps the dust. And the hammer's rhythm never varies, even when no curve, no cheek, no robe has yet emerged. Months later, a single ray of sunset falls across marble that suddenly breathes with life. Tourists marvel at an masterpiece that was, in truth, the harvest of relentless, quiet taps. So it is with disciplined persistence in imagination. One decisive assumption may ignite the law, yet only sustained rehearsal tempers that spark into a blazing reality. Understand first that persistence is not a clenched jaw or furrowed brow. Those belong to strain, not mastery. Discipline here means cheerful repetition, the unhurried return to a favored inner scene whenever idle moments present themselves. Waiting for the kettle to boil, you slip into the after picture of a phone alert announcing another deposit. Sitting in traffic, you replay the thrill of signing a donation check so large it draws grateful tears from its recipient. No ritual incense, no special posture, just a brief, vivid dip into certainty and back again. Each dip sinks the new identity deeper into the subconscious, much as dye penetrates fabric by repeated immersion. Consider the gardener who waters saplings at dawn. He does not stand guard throughout the day, pleading with leaves to sprout. He trusts the invisible chemistry of soil and sunlight. Yet at dawn next morning he waters again. His persistence is rhythmic, almost devotional, never tinged with panic. Adopt that gardener's cadence. Choose 1 or 2 moments each day that you will never allow to pass without entering the state of fulfilled desire, perhaps the minute after waking and the minute before sleep. Guard these twin appointments as faithfully as one would guard a crown jewel, for they are the sluice gates through which your future flows. Else will attempt sabotage, masquerading as sensible questions. But how will the contract be found? What if the market dips? Who am I to expect so much? Treat these queries like crows cawing at dawn, not worthy of argument, only of dismissal. A practiced way is to answer every mental protest with the same gentle phrase, "It is finished," and then resume the inner scene, exactly where you left off, as though the interruption never happened. Repetition without emotional charge, this is the sword that severs the tether of doubt. Many students falter because they confuse duration with intensity. They battle to maintain a blazing joy for 30 minutes and collapse exhausted, believing they have persisted. Far better is the soft, frequent whisper of certainty woven through the day. Imagine a violinist who strikes one perfect note every hour. Over time, the concert hall vibrates with resonance, even though no single note was thunderous. Let your assumptions be those perfect notes. The subconscious hears accumulation, not volume. To illustrate, I recall a young accountant who longed to leave corporate life and trade currency from his own beachside flat. He created a 5-second vision, his bare feet on a terrace, cool from night air, laptop glowing with profitable trades, gulls calling in the distance, 3 times a day, before breakfast, at lunch, and before bed. He stepped into that vision for maybe 20 breaths. The rest of his hours he simply performed his job without complaint. 8 months later, a colleague introduced him to a mentor who taught him a low-risk strategy. 12 months after that, his balcony photos began appearing on social feeds, every element matching the microvision he had watered with disciplined persistence. No frenzied marathons of fantasy, just the metronome of repeated acceptance. Use the body as partner in this rhythm, a subtle physical anchor, a hand pressed lightly over the heart, the thumb and forefinger joined, a slow exhale. can signal the mind to drop instantly into the prepared scene. Over weeks, the anchor and the assumption bond. One triggers the other automatically, sparing you the effort of reconjuring images from scratch. Athletes call this muscle memory. You may call it graceful efficiency. Track progress not by external milestones alone, but by the texture of thought. At first, you may need conscious effort to summon the feeling of wealth. Later, the feeling will surface unbidden, like a song that suddenly hums itself. When that happens, you are dwelling in the state more than you realize, and events must echo the dwelling. If discouragement arises because nothing is happening, remember that underground seeds show no green for many days. Yet the embryonic rootwork is furious. Persist gently a little longer, and shoots will pierce the soil with astonishing speed. Useful exercise is the ledger of faithfulness. Keep a small notebook beside the bed. Each night, jot a tick mark for every occasion you remembered to return to your fulfilled scene, no matter how briefly. Resist recording emotional highs or lows. Only record that you showed up. Within a fortnight, the cumulative tally will reveal why some harvests outpace others. Wherever the count is thin, resolve to add but one extra visit the next day. Gradual increments, like steady compound interest, outperform heroic bursts, followed by neglect. Finally, regard disciplined persistence as an artist regards daily practice. Joyful, inevitable, identity-defining. A pianist does not bemoan the scales. She knows they keep fingers fluent for the concerto. Your repeated assumptions keep consciousness fluent for the concerto of manifestation. Sit at the inner keyboard each day. Play those scales of certainty. The auditorium, life itself, already hangs velvet curtains and polishes brass rails for the premiere that your persistence will call inevitable. Imagine memory as a lantern whose glass you can polish or tint at will, altering the hue of every ray it casts on the path ahead. Most people trudge through life believing yesterday is a granite monument fixed forever. Yet the law discloses something far more elastic. The past is only a living film inside consciousness, editable at any instant, and each edit clips new frames into the reel of tomorrow. I once counseled a woman who carried the weight of a humiliating performance review. Month after month, the scene replayed, and every replay bled a little more confidence from her voice until clients sensed the tremor and contracts slipped away. I asked her to sit quietly, close her eyes, and lift that dreadful afternoon onto the stage of imagination. Instead of the manager's cold frown, she painted his face with warm approval. Instead of the word unsatisfactory, she heard exceptional. Let's promote you immediately. As she repeated the revision for 3 evenings, a curious thing occurred. The manager invited her to coffee, apologized for having misjudged her skill set, and charted a new role that doubled her income. She had not worked longer hours or earned advanced credentials. She had simply rewritten the only place where the event truly lived, her inner archive, thereby forcing outer history to develop an updated print. To practice revision, begin the moment you notice even the tiniest bruise in the fabric of your day. Perhaps a shop assistant was curt, a payment bounced, or your reflection seemed tired under unforgiving light. Before the mind hurries on, pause and summon the alternate outcome you would prefer. Hear the assistant's voice softened with courtesy. Watch the bank notification flash payment received. See the mirror glow with vitality. Be the revised scene in the feeling of rightness until the sting of the original dissolves. The hour is unimportant. Memory ignores clocks. Whether you adjust the record seconds after the incident or revisit it at night, the subconscious accepts the latest cut as master copy, and circumstances reorganize to match. Some worry that altering recollections borders on delusion. Yet consider that every memory is already a creative act. 2 siblings recall the same childhood meal and argue over the color of the tablecloth. If the mind naturally edits without your consent, why not direct the editing for benefit? rather than leave it to chance. Revision does not deny that an event occurred. It denies that the event holds creative authority over your present self. The only power the scene possesses is the emotion you keep renewing. Strip away that emotion, replace it with one harmonizing with your desire, and the old chronicle is powerless. Make a nightly ritual of review and revision. As you settle into bed and the body grows drowsy, scan the day like a film editor screening footage. Where the reel flickers with disappointment, freeze the frame, lift the unwanted dialogue and splice in a triumphant line. Where the colors dull, overlay a brighter palette. Feel each corrected moment until it rests comfortably in the heart, then move on. In 5 minutes you will have scrubbed a dozen misfires and filled them with sparks of desired reality. Drift to sleep holding one polished scene. Sleep then functions as the darkroom where the corrected negatives develop into physical prints. The technique shines brightest when applied to deep-rooted memories that seem to define identity. A man who spent years haunted by a childhood nickname, Slow Joe, found that no present achievement could silence the ghost. He devoted a fortnight to nightly revision, returning to the playground where the taunt began. Each time he pictured the moment, he replaced the jeers with enthusiastic cheers as he scored the winning goal in a make-believe game. Day by day, the nickname lost its sting. Soon, colleagues remarked on his quick, strategic thinking, and within months he accepted a position that demanded rapid analysis under pressure. The outer promotion merely confirmed the inner promotion he had scripted. When revising, trust feelings over visuals. A perfectly rendered image is useful, but a single rush of relief, pride, or affection carries more voltage than 1,000 crisp snapshots. Suppose you cannot visualize the manager's new smile. No matter. Simply conjure the warm surge of being recognized and valued. Emotion is the ink that sticks. Facts swirl around the stamp it leaves. Expect subtle bridges of incident to unfold after every successful revision. You might overhear an apology that feels oddly timed, receive a phone call mending an old misunderstanding, or discover a clerical error that nullifies an earlier financial penalty. Resist the temptation to label these happenings coincidence. Treat them instead as confirmation that the thread of time has been quietly rewoven in your favor. Some ask how often they must revisit a particular scene. The answer rests in the heartbeat. Repeat until the revised version feels like the only version that ever existed. At that moment you may release it, knowing the subconscious has filed it under permanent. Should stray doubts resurrect the old memory, meet them with gentleness. Simply launch the improved cut again and watch it play to the end. Doubts will tire of interrupting a show whose ending never changes. In instruction and craft alike, revision proves itself a sovereign tool. No craftsman would permit a flawed blueprint to guide steel and concrete. Likewise, no student of this law allows a painful imprint to dictate the architecture of days ahead. Continual pruning of memory trains the mind to accept only that which blesses. Practice tonight. Choose the day's most minor irritation and repaint it with favor. Let gratitude replace annoyance, serenity replace haste, triumph replace embarrassment. Fall asleep certain the world has noted the adjustment and will display the updated version on the moving screen of life. A tailor I once guided kept a crumpled scrap of paper beneath his counter on which he had scribbled, "Business is dying, nobody wants handmade anymore." Whenever a customer hesitated over price, he felt the words flare like a hidden coal, and his voice would falter just enough for the sale to vanish. I invited him to trade that scrap for a fresh note reading, "Clients cherish my craft and gladly pay its worth." He tucked the new sentence where the old had lain and, more importantly, began to repeat it in the silence between fittings. The first week nothing seemed to shift, yet he persisted in the new refrain. By the third week he caught himself smiling while threading needles, and customers noticed the glow. By the sixth, a boutique phoned begging for exclusive designs. He had stitched prosperity into his reality with nothing but sovereign speech. Every life is woven from such sentences murmured under the breath. They run like subterranean rivers whose currents tug events, relationships, even the chemistry of the body toward one fate or another. Most people treat these rivers as natural geography, fixed, unquestioned, sometimes feared, never realizing that a single deliberate phrase can divert the flow to greener valleys. Look closely at any sustained failure, and you will find a chorus of inner comments repeating like a stuck record. I'm always late. Money slips away. Clients are scarce. Change that refrain, and the outer soundtrack must remix itself, for circumstance is only the loudspeaker of intimate whispers. Begin your education by eavesdropping on yourself. Throughout tomorrow, catch the phrases that bloom uninvited when a bill arrives, when you price your work, when you glance at someone else's success. Do not judge, simply notice. Write them down at night as a scientist logs observations. You will discover a pattern as clear as fingerprints. Where the words lean toward lack, the facts lean the same way. This is not coincidence. It is causation disguised as routine. Now select one stubborn sentence that has ruled your finances like a petty tyrant. Perhaps it says, I'm terrible with numbers, or big money brings big problems. Draft its direct opposite in the present tense. Short, effortless on the tongue, impossible to misinterpret. Examples: I calculate with ease and profit. Large sums glide to me in harmony. Do not spice the line with desperation or flowery superlatives. Calm confidence carries farther than embellished pleading. Write it on a card, slip it in a wallet, set it as a lock screen, but more crucially, plant it in the soil of consciousness by repetition at natural pauses, stepping into an elevator, waiting for a page to load, sipping water. Each utterance is another rootlet gripping the ground beneath future events. You may worry that opposing statements will clash in the mind, the old cynic jeering as the new monarch ascends. Let them clash. The friction only speeds the dethronement. When the former sentence arises, greet it like a door-to-door peddler, and politely close the door with your chosen reply. If the inner critic hisses, "Who do you think you're fooling?" answer, "I require no permission to believe what serves me." The exchange need not last longer than a breath. Persistence, not volume, erodes the stone. A software engineer once confessed that every time his banking app opened, a silent "not enough" shot through his chest before the numbers even appeared. He replaced it with "more than plenty," whispered so quietly his lips never moved. For the first month, the statement felt laughable, but he continued. Soon an unexpected royalty from an open-source library arrived. Then a recruiter offered remote work at double rate. Finally, his landlord announced a rent freeze because you're such a reliable tenant. He had recoded the program beneath the app, the verbal script running the show. Support the new speech with feeling. Yet remember, feeling behaves like perfume. A subtle hint travels farther than a heavy blast. When you affirm funds flow freely, breathe as though they already do. Let shoulders drop, brows smooth, heartbeat settle into the temple of sufficiency. Physiology is a loyal echo. Invite it to the rehearsal, and belief takes root faster. Anchor the process at dawn and dusk, when the barriers between conscious and subconscious thin. As you wake, linger a heartbeat before rising and allow the chosen sentence to float upward on the first breath of the day. As you drift to sleep, let it be the last ripple on the pond of thought. These two moments bookend the waking narrative. Write prosperity in the margins, and the chapters between will follow the outline. Do not seek immediate proof with anxious eyes, for that stance suggests doubt beneath the words. Proof comes the way fruit ripens, invisibly at first, then all at once. Hold inner speech steady, and outer facts will stagger into agreement, often by pathways you could not design. An errant email, a casual introduction, a policy change favorable only to you. When such incidents occur, resist the urge to label them miracles. They are simply the logical headline to the article you have been dictating for weeks. If setbacks appear, avoid condemning the practice. Condemn only the lapse into the former phrase. Correct it gently, just as a singer finds pitch by reference to a tuning fork. The fork is your chosen sentence, pure, unwavering, indifferent to opinion. Strike it often. Let its tone vibrate through mind and sinew until even silence hums with it. Track progress in the laboratory of small things. Notice free coffees, waived fees, sudden gift cards, friends treating you to lunch. These are scouting parties of abundance, verifying that the route is clear. Welcome them with thanks, but keep the gaze on grander caravans to come. Speech has no size limit. The same syllables that procure a parking space can secure a fortune. In time, you will speak wealth as effortlessly as you now speak your name, and the world, hearing its own echo in your certainty, will answer back with cash, contracts, and creative opportunities that feel as inevitable as sunrise. Guard, therefore, the sentences that bloom within you. They are deeds filed in the courthouse of reality long before any ink meets paper. Detach, just as a mountain detaches from the weather that rings its crown. The cloud may veil its peak at dawn, yet the granite neither complains nor consults mirrors to be sure it is still majestic. Exalted indifference is this regal stillness after a desire has been planted. You have felt the million in your hand, accepted its reality, thanked life for the harvest in advance. Now your task is to walk the earth as calmly as if the coins already clink in your pocket. The farmer does not pace the rows each hour to see whether kernels have sprouted. He trusts the hidden chemistry of soil, warmth, and moon-drawn tides. Mimic that trust, for the power that shapes stalks in darkness is the same power translating your inner image into tomorrow's headline. A young composer once shared that he would finish a score in imagination, hear the applause, even smell the velvet curtains, then sabotage the miracle by refreshing his email every 5 minutes to check for commissions. The inbox, eerily loyal to his anxious tapping, remained silent. We practiced indifference. After rehearsing the future premiere one final time, he closed the laptop, set a boundary of 4 email checks per day, and filled the new intervals with walks beneath chestnut trees, learning recipes, reading poetry aloud. Within 10 days, a conductor who had mistyped his address months earlier found the correct one and wrote, "Where have you been hiding? This concerto is perfect for our winter program." The gap between seed and sprout collapsed the moment tension released its chokehold. Indifference here is not apathy. It is majestic confidence. Picture a king signing an edict. He does not trail the courier through the capital to verify delivery. His seal is enough. Your assumption is that seal. When you live from the fulfilled end, fussing over evidence feels as absurd as yanking on seedlings to hasten their growth. The universe, call it law, mind, quantum field, responds to settled conviction, not to feverish second-guessing. Therefore, once the feeling is established, shift attention to ordinary joys. Savor orange zest on the tongue. Listen to rain glide down a window. Notice how sunlight halos strangers on the street. Such savoring keeps the nervous system in receptive mode, while unseen avenues prepare your fortune. Practical technique. Assign yourself a cooling period after every imaginal act. For 5 minutes, you immerse in the scene until emotion peaks. Then for at least an hour, you refuse to speak of the desire, Google strategies, or peek at indicators. Should curiosity itch, breathe low, smile, and recall that the decree has left the palace. This rhythm trains the subconscious to treat your visions as settled law rather than petitions awaiting verdict. Opposites will parade before your senses as if sent to mock the practice. Expect them and remain unmoved. An invoice may arrive larger than usual, a deal may stall, a well-meaning friend may warn of layoffs. These are nothing but last projections of a film whose reel you have already replaced. Watch them fade like twilight banners and keep your pulse even. When doubts hiss, answer with a gentle, "All is unfolding." Then return to whatever task lies in your hand. A pot of soup stirred in peace can carry more magnetic power than hours of fretful affirmation. Notice how indifference liberates energy. The mind no longer chained to outcome, hunting becomes an observatory for inspiration. Ideas for new ventures drift in during a shower. An impulse to phone an old colleague strikes while waiting at a traffic light. A line of music descends between sips of tea. Act on these nudges lightly, without dramatizing them as the way. They are simply stepping stones. The river reveals once you stop splashing. An entrepreneur I guided adopted a playful symbol. Every time he caught himself scanning indicators, he pictured a delivery owl perched outside the window with a sealed envelope already addressed to him. The image made him chuckle and instantly relax. The habit of checking dwindled. Revenue that quarter doubled, not by mystical coincidence, but by the steadiness that let him recognize and seize quiet openings he would have missed in a frenzy of control. Use the body as ally. Should restlessness rise, perform a simple grounding. Press soles firmly against the floor. Inhale 4 counts, exhale 6. The elongated out-breath signals the limbic system that all is well, restoring the regal state. Tell yourself, movement is happening on planes I cannot see, and release tension through shoulders and jaw. The body's ease becomes the silent proof to the deeper mind that fulfillment is already secure. Anchor indifference in language. Replace "I hope it works" with "it is appointed." Replace "when will it arise" with "everything arrives on perfect schedule." Speak these phrases not to convince circumstance, but to remind yourself of your office. They are the soft velvet lining inside the steel glove of faith. Record the day's serendipities, small refunds, sudden compliments, a parking space appearing at the exact moment you turn the corner. Each notation trains you to expect benevolent orchestration without straining for it. Indifference does not mean detachment from gratitude. Celebrate every proof that the machinery hums on your behalf while declining to peek inside the gears. Finally, treat delays as seasoning. Just as dough rests before baking to let yeast breathe, so a desire often benefits from gestation you cannot fathom. The right collaborator must finish her internship, the ideal market must ripen, a regulation must change in your favor. Your calm allows these alignments to mature without premature interference. When the curtain lifts, you will recognize the precision of timing and wonder why you ever fidgeted. Live then as the orchard lives, roots sunk deep in unseen assurance, branches lifted casually to sky, blossoms forming while nobody watches. You have settled the matter in imagination. Now walk the fields, whistle a tune, and let the harvest hurry to find you in its own magnificent silence. Think of the world's hardest facts as no more fixed than wet sand beneath a child's palm. A medical test, a bank foreclosure notice, a long-standing feud, each parades itself as granite. Yet the moment consciousness impresses a new image upon it, the solid begins to soften and swirl into rearrangement. I learned this from a watchmaker who, after 30 years of surveyors, posted bright placards that screamed inevitability. Neighbors spoke as though the shops were already rubble. Instead of protesting, he spent every lunch break behind a shuttered door, eyes closed, hearing the chime of his own bell welcoming a future clientele. He polished an imaginal counter of mahogany and watched tourists marvel at antique timepieces gleaming beneath glass. 2 months later, the city council, citing heritage value, shifted the development 2 blocks east and turned his storefront into the centerpiece of a new pedestrian square. His rent dropped under a preservation grant, and foot traffic tripled. The bulldozers had met an obstacle more real than blueprints, a mind that refused to classify circumstances as marble. To treat facts as clay, begin by stripping them of the prestige we habitually grant them. Numbers on a spreadsheet are nothing but symbols inked by someone's earlier imagination. Diagnoses are sets of observations interpreted through a lens that shifts with every medical decade. Even age and pedigree, which people wield like interlocking armor, prove astonishingly pliable once a new self-concept is accepted. Recognize this pliability not as theory but as operational truth, and you step into the potter's studio, hands already dusted with possibility. The first tool on the bench is sensory exchange. When confronted with an unlovely fact, do not wrestle it, lift it, replace its color, and set it back down. Suppose a letter arrives demanding immediate payment. Before panic roots, close the eyes and feel the paper grow warm with good news. See the figures transform into a surplus or a refund. Catch the tone of relief, the laugh that escapes your chest, the mental image of filing the letter as resolve. Hold the new texture until it lives in you with the same familiarity as your name. When the envelope re-enters thought, let only the revised version surface. As a blacksmith quenches hot metal to fix shape, you quench the revised feeling by refusing repeats of the original dread. Soon a phone call waives the fee, or an unrelated windfall cancels it out. No coincidence exists. Clay has obeyed the mold. Practice often with trivial items so skill ripens before large sculptures are attempted. Turn a drizzle into sunshine on a weekend outing, an empty restaurant into a vibrant hum before your meal arrives. Each small success anchors deeper conviction, teaching the nerves that change follows imagination the way an echo follows voice. Repetition like this removes the strain of trying, replacing it with the calm expectation a pilot feels when pulling a familiar lever. Guard against the covert sabotage of gossip. Family, friends, and headlines love to declare conditions irreversible. Smile inwardly and remember that every spoken certainty about markets or medicine is but yesterday's conclusion dressed as law. Treat such opinions as potter's dust floating through the workshop, present but incapable of stiffening the clay unless you let it settle. When you hear someone declare a crisis permanent, silently answer, clay, and move on. Another instrument is selective attention. The senses present only a slice of reality, yet what the mind lingers on grows roots. A gardener once battled a failing crop until he changed a single habit. Before stepping outside, he spent 2 minutes imagining rows heavy with fruit. Without conscious effort, he then lingered over the healthiest leaves instead of the blighted ones, watered where soil begged for it, pruned with inspired timing, doubled. Neither luck nor meteorology shifted, only the gardener's gaze, which allowed latent vitality to dominate the scene. In the same way, dwell on aspects of your life that already approximate your aim, however modest, and they will swell, crowding out the rest. Language shapes clay swiftly. Remove absolute phrases like, "That's just how it is," or "Nothing ever works here." Replace them with fluid statements. Everything responds, new channels open by the hour. This situation bends easily to favor. Speak them aloud in an empty room if need be. Words vibrate through tissue, altering posture and biochemistry, signaling to subconscious fibers that the order is live. Once the inner workshop hums with commands of flexibility, the outer forms begin to sag and slide toward congruence. Time, too, is supple. Many imagine they must wait years for entrenched patterns to yield, but time stretches or contracts according to intensity and purity of assumption. A widow who dreaded a 5-year slog to clear debts instead spent 10 concentrated evenings picturing her ledger stamped paid in full. On the 11th morning, a distant relative phoned to transfer ownership of a lakeside cottage she had never heard of. Its quick sale ended the debt within a month. She had not accelerated time. She had dissolved it as a barrier. Expect bridges of incidents. Clay does not jump unaided from lump to statue. It passes through fingerprints and spinning wheels. After you impress the finished image, watch for mundane nudges, a chance article suggesting a new treatment, a stranger mentioning a vacancy, a forgotten hobby resurfacing. Act naturally on these, knowing they are the potter's wheel turning under your design. Action is not the cause of change, but the channel through which change completes itself. Finally, maintain the attitude of finished artistry. When a sculptor retires for the night, he does not panic that the figure will revert to raw earth by dawn. He covers it confident that curing continues in darkness. Adopt the same serenity. Once your inner template feels solid, once the relief, gratitude, or triumph seems normal, withdraw attention and live the day. Circumstance may wobble like soft clay exposed to air, yet resist poking it with worry. Each poke restores the former shape. Stand back, smile at your work, and let the kiln of unseen law harden it into the exact form you commanded. Imagine wealth as rain that gathers in a high mountain lake and then hurries downhill, reviving every field it touches, never once fretting that the lake will empty. The eighth principle asks you to become both lake and river, to let money arrive with ease, rest in store, and flow outward again in confident generosity. A merchant I once guided hoarded earnings the way a desert rock hoards shade. His accounts grew, yet customers thinned, and unexpected expenses punctured his reserve. He experimented with a simple reversal. Every Friday he selected one bill and paid it early, adding a silent blessing for the hands that would receive it. Within 3 months, Friday's sales alone exceeded his former weekly total, and suppliers began offering discounts he had never requested. The dam of fear broke, and circulation returned, wealth in wider loops than he could have engineered. Why does giving expand rather than diminish? Because money, like blood, thrives on movement. Stagnation breeds clots. Flow nourishes the entire organism, including the heart from which it departs. Treat each outgoing coin as a seed, not a sacrifice. When you tip a server, whisper inwardly, multiply. When you donate to a cause, feel the ripple touch distant shores and rebound to you as unseen friendships, unexplained upgrades, serendipitous invitations. The feeling is key. Reluctant giving mimics loss, but joyful release engraves the subconscious with the identity of one who always has more than enough to share. Begin training by setting a percentage, however small, that you will circulate deliberately each week. Label it expansion capital, never charity or cost. Before handing it over, pause long enough to visualize the good it will accomplish. Groceries on a stranger's table, books in a rural school, fresh paint brightening a widow's porch. Let the warm surge of usefulness fill your chest. Soon you will notice peculiar returns, a refund you forgot you were owed, a client paying ahead of schedule, a friend gifting concert tickets. Record each in a notebook titled Evidence of Circulation, so the intellect cannot dismiss them as coincidence. Language fortifies the habit. Replace I can't afford to give with I welcome every chance to sow. Replace money goes out faster than it comes with money travels out to call more home. These phrases, murmured when paying rent or taxes, transform obligatory drains into confident investments. The nervous system, hearing the uplifted tone, relaxes. Relaxed nerves perceive openings tense nerves miss. A buyer's subtle cue, an overlooked grant, a niche market ready to bloom. Guard against the counterfeit of reckless spending. Circulation is not impulse. A river that breaches its banks ruins the harvest. Ask before each outflow, does this align with my chosen story of generous prosperity? If the answer is yes, release funds gladly. If no, keep them circulating within existing channels. Accelerate a mortgage payment, replenish inventory, or invest in skill. Responsibility and generosity are twins. Together they prove that abundance is not mere arithmetic, but an attitude of ordered plenty. Use imagery to deepen the principle. During quiet meditation, picture a golden current entering through the crown of your head, pooling in the heart, then streaming out through hands to bless projects, people, and places. Watch, in imagination, the current loop back in wider arcs until you stand in a luminous exchange, too swift for counting. 5 minutes of such rehearsal rewires the neural map of wealth from finite escalation to infinite cycling. A software designer adopted this visualization, pairing each outgoing invoice with a brief inner video of light spiraling to customers and spiraling back as referrals. Within a year, his client roster grew so dense he began referring projects to colleagues who, in gratitude, sent him equity stakes in their startups. His initial giving returned as passive income streams worth multiples of the fees he had declined. Observe how nature models the principle. An apple tree releases fruit far beyond its own need. The fallen seeds promise new orchards guaranteeing the species' future. Rivers that concede water to irrigation find their level restored by snowmelt and rain. Even your lungs must exhale to draw the next breath. In this living tapestry, hoarding appears not as prudence, but as defiance of the basic rhythm that keeps galaxies whirling. To test the lesson quickly, practice the 48-hour circulation challenge. Today, give something valuable enough to notice, not enough to harm, but enough to stretch comfort. Hand it, mail it, or transfer it with sincere blessing. Then forget the act and conduct business as usual, merely noting any positive anomaly that surfaces within 48 hours. A stranger's compliment, a waived fee, a sudden solution to a nagging problem. You will glimpse the reflex of the universe to fill vacated space, often through channels you did not connect to your giving. Repeat weekly until the link feels undeniable. When large sums begin to move, elevate record-keeping. Assign each inflow a purpose. Living, investing, circulating. The mind loves clarity, and clarity banishes the subconscious fear that generosity might outrun supply. Review the ledger monthly with a spirit of gratitude, not audit. Speak aloud, all accounts are vessels of blessing, none can run dry, and feel the statement settle as calm fact. Remember that circulating wealth is not confined to currency. Volunteers who pour skill into community projects often watch dormant careers ignite. Mentors who gift knowledge to apprentices find their own creativity refreshed, leading to breakthroughs no private study produced. Whatever talent or resource passes through you obeys the same law. Release initiates return. Should a lean season arrive, double the practice instead of halting it. Prove to your nervous system that flow is not a luxury of surplus, but the cause of surplus. A poet who lost his day job spent an afternoon writing personalized verses for patrons of a cafe refusing payment. Photos of the event circulated online. Within weeks, a publisher commissioned his first book. Circulation turned deficit into debut. Finish each day with a whispered thank you for every channel, income, outgo, and yet to come. Gratitude seals the circuit, preventing leaks of doubt. Drift to sleep hearing coins splash playfully in a fountain whose source lies under your pillow, and whose streams wind outward to waters cities beyond sight, then curve back, sparkling, to refill the bowl before dawn. Thus you stand as reservoir and river, never anxious about the measure left in storage, forever delighted by the speed of the current you set in motion with each intentional gift. You have taken a full tour of the inner country where fortunes are born, stepping first into the identity of a millionaire, tuning the emotional note that commands numbers, returning to the scene until it is second nature, revising memory so it can only bless, patrolling every silent phrase, resting in regal indifference, kneading facts like pliant clay, and finally allowing wealth to circulate as freely as breath. What began as separate principles now feel like facets of one jewel, imagination accepted as law. When these facets align, light enters from any angle and flashes everywhere at once. So the smallest act, a thought before sleep, a tip laid down with thanks, can refract into contracts, cures, reconciliations, inheritances, creative bursts, and open doors you had not known existed. Carry the certainty with you. Nothing in your outer panorama stands alone. Each figure in an account, each face across a desk, each headline or test result, is only the latest footprint of an earlier mood. Shift the mood, and the footprints must change direction. Keep the mood steady, and a whole boulevard of outcomes marches to your drum. You need not strain for proof. Proof is inevitable because consciousness is the parent and circumstance the obedient child. The universe has no choice but to echo your sustained assumption, just as a valley cannot refuse to echo a shout. So, walk forward now with the composure of one who has already arrived. Spend from the feeling of surplus. Speak from the calm of authority. Revise any moment that jars, and revisit your chosen end as lovingly as a gardener waters seed. When opposition appears, bless it as a sign that the old shell is cracking. When bridges of incident unfold, cross them with a light heart. And when the harvest comes, whether as a sudden windfall or a quiet, cumulative swell, accept it as the most natural thing in the world, and let gratitude seal the cycle. Tonight, close your eyes and feel the applause of a destiny fulfilled. Let the scene fade only when its reality feels as ordinary as tomorrow's sunrise. Then sleep, trusting that unseen hands are arranging daylight to match the dream you've just claimed. And when morning breaks, rise not as a seeker, but as the heir who knows beyond question that the time has come and the millions are already yours.